What's up folks, this is Zach with ECS Tuning, and today we're doing a DIY on something that all N54 owners have to deal with at some point or another. Turbos. Our turbos are dead, they're leaking at the oil seals, and they're rattling at the wastegates. So it's time to replace them. We figured we'd make you a DIY while we were at it, because these are expensive to have done at a shop because it's kind of a pain in the ass to get them out. So we're trying to give the power back to the people and show you how to do it at home. So we went with Vargas's OEM turbo. It's based on an OEM housing with an upgraded thrust bearing and an upgraded wastegate assembly, so they'll last a lot longer than the originals. And these ones also have their optional 6x6 billet compressor wheel, which is good for an increased 20% in airflow. So these will make 500 wheel horsepower if you throw fueling and stuff at them. So that's pretty good, but if you want to make more than that, Vargas has options all the way up through 900 wheel horsepower. So whatever you're trying to make, Vargas can make it happen. Their turbos are fantastic, and so are the rest of their parts. We're also going to be going with their silicone inlet pipes. So we're going to get right into it. It might turn into a little bit of a long video because there's kind of a lot to do, but that's the only way we can do it and be thorough. So we'll skip a few steps at the beginning, some real basic stuff, but we'll go over that in a second. So let's show you how to do it. All right, so to get things moving, we've got some basic stuff already done, so we'll cover what we've got out of the way already. We have oil and coolant drained, engine cover off, intake out, all the belly pans underneath are off, and the front wheels are off. We also don't have any inlet pipes on the car. This long since hasn't had stock inlet pipes, but currently we don't have any inlet pipes on it. So that's our starting point. Yeah, we're doing it in a shop on a lift, so it's gonna make it a little bit easier, but that's the only way we can show you how to do it. So the first thing we're gonna do is pull the expansion tank. All right, so we're gonna pop these lines, just get a pick under the retaining clips, pull them off. And then we've got a couple 10 millimeters. And your car may have vacuum canisters right here. Ours have been relocated at some point, so if you do have vacuum canisters, get those out as well. All right, so you just pull it up out of one grommet, disconnect the sensor. All right, so as hardware starts to come off the car, it is time to talk about cataloging your hardware. So it's easy to lose track of bolts. I like to use, we have cups here, so I use cups to just write down what the things are. You can use plastic bags or whatever the hell you want. All right, so now we're gonna remove these two solenoid or wastegate solenoids. There are 4 10 millimeter nuts, and then they'll come right off. Then we're gonna take the heat shield beneath them off as well. To get this heat shield off, there are 4 nuts underneath. They are an E8. This is a BMW, so you gotta have your E-sockets ready. All right, so there you can see the turbos now, so that's a step in the right direction, but we still can't get them out. So now we need to put our engine support bar in place so we can drop the subframe so we can get those out. All right, so now we're screwing a tow hook into the head so we can put on our Schwaben engine support bar. All right, we're gonna take the sway bar out now. We're gonna start by popping off the end links with 2 17s. All right, now a couple 13s, well, 4 13s for the brackets. All right, so on these you got to counter hold with a T40. Sometimes you can get away with not counter holding it, but this one started spinning, so here we go. All right, now we're going to remove the power steering rack hardware. This is an E12, and there's a 16 millimeter nut on top. All right, so we're going to pop the lower U-joint off the steering column, and that should give us enough room to pull the rack down and swing it out of the way without without disconnecting the power steering lines. It is an E11. going to try to tie this thing up just so it's not hanging on the lines. And so it'll be out of the way for the rest of this. All right, now we're going to pull the rear control arms and the front control arms. These are 218s. Ah, that doesn't fit. All right, now we're going to pull these two tabs off with a couple 8mm. Woo! All right, now we've got 3 T30s to get this coolant line off. There's one there, and then one up in here on the subframe. All right, so now we're going to pull the engine mount hardware. We've got some 13s here, but on some models you'll have eTorx hardware. Get our subframe nice and supported, and then we'll pull the bolts. All right, subframe is held on by 6 bolts. They are 18mm heads, so we're going to pull them off, subframe supported, and then we'll let the support down, bring the subframe down. So I'm going to add some auxiliary jack stands to try to get the brakes and all these hanging components out of the way so the subframe has a little more room to drop down. Just keep going that way until I can get that tie rod in. Okay. And that's the subframe. All right, so just to be safe, I'm going to throw another one of these stands up under the oil pan with a rubber block, just to make sure I don't die. All right, we're just going to pop the O2 sensors, and then we're going to remove the downpipes with a couple 13s. Oh, come on with ya. I love it when that 2 sensor comes out nice. All right, so now we're going to pop the V-bands. They are 13mm. In this case, and then the downpipes will be off. All right, now we're going to pull off this engine mount bracket. There's 4 E14 bolts, and that'll give us a little better view of the rear turbo. Okay, so now we need to get the water pump out so we can get to the front turbo. We're going to start by popping this hose off. I got a 1/4-inch socket for these. You can also use flathead, obviously. And like I said, we drained the coolant, but there's still going to be coolant in here, so I've got my catch can ready. Come on. Oh yeah, lots. Sick. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to pull the retaining clip out of this connector on the thermostat housing, and I'll pop that sucker off. Okay, so now to get the thermostat housing out, we got to take these two 10s off, and then thermostat housing will be out. Yeah. All right, we're gonna get these coolant lines off now. We got 2 T30s and 4 E8s. Good thing I have this tool. I'm gonna remove the hardware for these heat shields. It is 4mm Allens and some E8s. So anyway, we're gonna remove this and then we're gonna pop off these coolant lines and try to bend them under the heat shield. And then that'll allow us to remove this hard coolant line and pop that off so we can take the water pump off as well. Ta-da! All right, got those out, so now we can pull off the hard line. So, and now we're ready to remove the 3, what are these, E12s for the water pump. I'm gonna pull this off, I guess, since I loosened that up. And that's a water pump. Replace that while you're in here. All right, now we are going to remove the turbo outlet. It's going to be 2 V-bands with a 5mm Allen and then a hose clamp on this one. We have an aftermarket intercooler, so your results may vary, but that's an 8mm or a flathead. All right, now we're going to pull off the oil drain lines. We're just going to pull them off the block and leave them dangling on the turbos. 2 T30s right there, and then you just wiggle them out. All right, this one's giving us a little struggle getting off. It's a little tight right here, so I'm just going to pop it at the turbo just to get it out of the way. It's, what is it, 5mm Allen. Okay, now we're going to pull the upper coolant lines. We're just going to pull them off the turbo and then let them dangle from the block. It's 1 T30 that holds in both of these right here. So T30, and then we'll wiggle them out from the turbos. Right on my chest, right where I like it. All right, now we just got to pop the vacuum lines off the wastegates. All right, so now we're ready to take all the nuts off and pull the turbos down. There are 16 of them. Externally, they're an 11mm, or you can use a T50 internally. You might have to do a little bit of both. Some of them you can't get an 11 on. So we'll get all the ones we can get with a socket. I forgot to take the oil feed line out of the top. We talked about that earlier, but make sure you take your feed line out. It's a T30 at the top of the turbo. All right, so we're on our last nut. And once these come off, then the turbos will come right down once all your lines are off.
All right, so now with the turbos out of the way, we're going to pull the oil feed line out of the way because we are replacing the oil feed lines. Oh, still some goop in there. Okay, now we're going to pull out all the exhaust studs with the E6 socket. And then once those are out of the way, we're going to clean up this surface and we're going to remove all of these old gaskets. Oh, I'm just twisting the head right off of it. So sometimes the heads of these just break off. These things are really soft. So if that's the case, you can get at them with some vice grips or more tried and true method, the old jam nut. Just get 2 nuts on there, twist them against each other, and then you can use them to take them off. All right, now we're going to pop off our last 2 coolant lines so we can replace the internal O-rings, and then it's going to be reassembly time. Hopefully not. All right, so currently we have everything removed and we're about ready to start installation of parts. The first thing I'm going to install, I think the easiest way to do it, we're going to install the rear silicone inlet. So, you know, turbos are out of the way, nothing's in the way. We'll drop the engine down a little bit. We've got the cowl out of the way. There's just 2 8mm bolts and then it pops out. So with the cowl out of the way, we've got some room, and the rear inlet is gonna go right above the bell housing of the transmission and around the back of the engine. So we're gonna jam that puppy in now. All right, so now we're down beneath. We've got it fed about as far through as you can get it from up top. Now we've got a hook on it from down here. You can see the area it needs to go through is real small, so try to wiggle her through. Okay, all right, so indeed that is about where we want to be. So now we'll kind of leave that guy just dangling there until later. There we go. Like it's no big deal. Come on, puppy. Okay, so now that we've got the turbo inlet pipes hanging in place, it's time to start installing some new hardware. For that, we've got our turbo install kit. It comes with everything you need to install some new turbos. So we've got studs and nuts, we've got O-rings and gaskets, everything you need. We also, these are outside of the kit, we've got some new oil feed and drain lines. But first I'm going to reinstall or install all our new studs to 7.4 foot-pounds or 10 Newton meters. All right, so we're going to be reusing our coolant lines. So if you're reusing your lines, you need to replace the O-rings, which are included in the install kit, and you need to make sure that they're clear of debris. So run a little water through your coolant lines, maybe a little compressed air, and just make sure that they're clean. So now I need to replace these O-rings. Okay, now with these O-rings on, I'm going to dab a little bit of oil on them just to make sure they don't get pinched or cut up on install. Because that would suck. All right, now we're ready to pop our outer coolant lines back into place. They're a little lubed up. Make sure they go in nice and smoothly so you don't end up with any leaks. Like that, perfect. Yeah. Not for very many things, but every once in a while.
That's literally the only thing you could ever use that for.
Yep. Okay, so now we're going to put the oil drain line on the rear turbo. We can match it up to the turbo that came off since we're replacing the lines. Get our gasket. All right, now we're going to put our feed line into the rear turbo. Maybe. All right, so now we're going to put the oil drain line on the front turbo. All right, now we're ready to put our oil feed line in the front turbo. Make sure we don't cut the ring as always. All right, now we're just putting the exhaust gaskets in place, and then these turbos are ready to go up. All right, rear turbo is going up. Too many things in my hands. Maybe that's part of my problem. All right, now we're going to torque down our copper nuts to 20 newton meters, or about 15 foot-pounds. Okay, so before we install the front turbo, we're going to make it a little easier just by popping this heat shield the rest of the way off. There's only one more bolt holding it in. And we'll be able to slip it in behind the turbo once it's on. All right, we're ready to slide our front turbo in. We need to mind our water line there and get it through. And then onto the studs. Okay, so we've got them all torqued down to 20 newton meters or 15 foot-pounds. Now we need to go back and double check our torque. See? All right, so we're gonna just slide our left heat shield back kind of into place and let it hang there. Then we're gonna pop our oil feed lines together. Make sure to get them seated just so. Now we're going to pop our coolant line back into the turbo. And on the front, same thing. All right, we'll slap the other heat shield into place now. If we can figure out how it's supposed to go. Like that, like that. All right, now we're going to connect our vacuum lines back to the wastegates. All right, we got to replace the O-ring or gasket in the coolant pipe here. Oops. we are ready to reinstall this bad boy. All right, now I'm gonna finally put some hardware in these heat shields. Whoops. All right, now we're gonna throw the water pump back up in. Pop her onto that line. All right, torque spec on the aluminum bolts for the water pump is 10 Newton meters or 7.5 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. All right, now we're gonna slap our thermostat housing back into place. While we're at it, we'll plug in our electrical connector. And our electrical connector to the thermostat housing. Okay, so this is where I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have put the hardware in the heat shield yet. The coolant supply lines need to go behind the heat shield. So I'm just gonna take these out and bend them up a little bit, and we should have no problem getting them in. Now, under the heat shield. And we should land pretty good. Okay, so O-rings lubed up, they're still clean, no damage. We just pop them into place. Oh yeah. And into the turbo. Oh yeah. Now we're gonna put hardware in the water lines. Okay, now we're gonna wrestle the inlet pipes onto the turbos, and you wanna make sure that you get these on really well and tighten them down real tight, because you don't wanna have to go back in here and redo this. Aisha, Aisha. Crank her down nice and tight. Now we're going to replace our O-rings on the turbo outlet pipe. Right now we're gonna put this here coolant hose back in place. Maybe, maybe not. All right guys, from here on out, reassembly is basically just the opposite of removal. So check back to the disassembly part of the video for torque specs. And one thing I want to make sure we cover is priming the turbo. So once you get everything back together, make sure that you disconnect your ignition or pull your ECU fuse and crank the engine for like 60 seconds to make sure that you get oil into the turbo before you actually start your engine. Other than that, we should be pretty good.
So give us any questions or comments if you have any further questions on the install. And if you're looking for some Vargas turbos, like we said, they've got OEM plus options up to 900 wheel horsepower. You can find those at ecstuning.com, as well as the install kit or any replacement hardware you need. You can also find links in the description below for that stuff. So thanks for watching. I hope it helped you. We'll see you guys next time.